Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well today on this wonderful Monday morning. I just wanted to reach out and say thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. We hope that will be insightful and answer all the additional questions that you guys have. We will be recording this webinar just to let everybody know. The slides on this presentation and the copy of the webinar will be placed on the GOEVIN this afternoon, shortly after this. Additionally, um, a newer updated version based on the questions that are going to be in this webinar will be placed on our website just to reflect what happened. Any additional questions that anybody does have, please send us an email so that we can work together and make sure those answers are questions before the deadline. We will be having a question and answer later on during the presentation, just to let everybody know. During this webinar, we're going to be talking about the overview, talk about the timeline a little bit, and of course, a majority of this time is going to answer any questions you guys have. We want to thank all our sponsors, Perlin, EV United, Zimmerman Electric, EZ Tesco, UAW, Northwest Property Development, and Zeph Energy for sponsoring our Closing the Gap tour that we had previously done in the last 2 weeks. Next slide, please. Perfect. So we wanted to go talk about who is eligible for this funding opportunity. I like to think of eligible, the E in eligible, to be E for everybody. If you are a for-profit, nonprofit, federal, state, or local government agency, or any organization within the state of Indiana, you are eligible for this funding. With this funding, we have split it off into two different types of chargers, DC fast charging and level 2 charging. One thing I would like to make sure everybody knows that these charging funding opportunities are for publicly available EV charging. For DC fast charging, which are going to be best suited for highway, interstate travel, to make it easier for EV drivers traveling long distances, we have allocated roughly $3.2 million to equip the charging infrastructure and the ports across the state. For level 2, which is going to be best suited for municipalities, retail, grocery stores, we have allocated roughly $170,000 for level 2 charging equipment across the state. Next slide, please. Perfect. For the eligibility for this funding, for DC charging, we have allocated $200,000 maximum per site with a minimum of 2 ports, allowing 100 kilowatts per port. If the site does not include that, we will cover up to 75% of the 75% of the project. Again, these DC chargers need to be open and available for the public 24/7 and at least a mile off an off-fuel alternative corridor. For level 2 chargers, we have a maximum allocation of $10,000 per location or 75% of the project. These can be accessible during business hours, but with the 2 ports, each port needs to provide at least 7.2 kilowatts. Next slide, please. Perfect. We at GoEVI and IDEM INDOT have identified 7 priority locations around the state. However, even though there might be more projects submitted that are not along these selected priority locations, we are still looking to fund those opportunities and for every project to be submitted. For example, State Road 41 starts in East Chicago and goes all the way down to Evansville. As you can see, that is pretty bare. There are only a couple chargers close to the larger cities, and part of our mission is to close that gap. Our goal is to install superchargers every 50 miles to make it more convenient for EV drivers. Next slide, please. Perfect. GOEVIN has always been in collaborative efforts with the state of Indiana, trying to make it easy for anybody that has an EV to go anywhere within the state. We have prioritized projects within all the communities to help EV deployments across the entire state. Like I mentioned, our mission is to provide fast chargers every 50 miles, just to make it more convenient for all drivers, as well as we developed a cohesive approach to benefit all drivers, whether that is electric, if they're driving hydrogen vehicles, etc. Perfect. This is going to be important just because I can't believe June is almost over. We thank the for all the opportunity you have that you attended this webinar today. The proposal deadline we have set is going to be June 30th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time or 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. During the month of July, we will be reviewing all the proposals, talking we'll make a prioritization of all the projects and make a final selection. Those selected projects will be notified by July 31st. Grant agreements will be fully executed mid-August, and we have designated projects to be completed and fully implemented by December 31st of next year. I would also like to bring one word into um, I would like to talk about one word in the table. It's approximate. We know these are aggressive dates, but we want to make sure all projects are eligible, and we want to make sure that all projects are heard. So if something does not work, and you do have any questions, feel free to let us know. But there is a strict deadline of the proposal or the intake form submission on June 30th. Perfect. Um, Talking a little bit more about the intake form, we strive to make things as easy as possible. Even though we do love to read 20, 30 pages of documentation, we are putting you first. So we want to make sure this is as easy as possible. Within the intake form, we only ask for a scope of work, a project budget, which can be broken down to electrical upgrades, hardware, software, O&M, and other operating costs. If you are not the site owner, we would like just to know that in advance, because working with, if you are a third-party applicant, we would like to see at least a 5-year commitment documentation and works with that site host. We also would like to see a project timeline, W-9 form, etc. If you do have any questions about the intake form, feel free to email us. Okay. Next slide, please. Perfect. Um, like I said earlier, majority of this time is going to be designated for questions. So if there are any questions, we would ask you to do a couple things. One, please state your name and the organization that you work with. Feel free to type the questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand and ask your question, okay?
All right. Thank you very much, John. I'm going to be taking over here once again. Um, we're going to open up our Q&A. Please be concise. Do not linger on, and we will try to answer all of your questions as we possibly can. And so just kind of get us started, feel free to raise your hand. And if you have a question, we will unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. And or you can always type your questions in the chat and we will read them off and review them and answer them here. If we cannot answer them, we'll be following up. And if we have, if these will also be posted on the GOEVIN website. All right. So just getting into this, one of the frequently asked questions that we have is cost sharing or a match requirement. Cost sharing is required, and the minimal cost sharing is 25% off the total cost of the project. And the grant funding will go up to the different amounts available. That's $200,000 for a DC fast charging location and up to $10,000 for a level two charging station. Applicants must demonstrate leverage funds or partnerships. And additionally, you may even receive additional points during the evaluation process. Looks like we have our first question, and we are going to unmute Lucy Swenson. So, Lucy, you are unmuted.
Hi, this is Lucy Swenson. I'm with the Evansville Climate Collaborative. This just raised another question. What would be those partnerships that could receive additional points for us to be aware of? And then my second question is on section 2 of the intake form, the total project budget. Is that including whatever matched funds we would provide, or just what we're requesting from the grant?
Okay, so to answer question one, we're going to want to see relationships that can demonstrate the need for these charging stations and any type of outside relationships that can show the demand. And for example, I'll use Vanderburgh County Sheriff Department, and they're looking, or they have deployed one electric vehicle. But if there were multiple departments, other private fleets that would be using these charging stations, that would be the way that we'd be able to justify the demand for the project. And your second question, can you just dive a little bit more deep on, please?
Yeah, sorry, it was more helpful to ask them separately. So it's on section 2 of the intake form. This is just an internal question we had in our office. It says the total project budget. Um, does that include what we would be matching, like the cost share, or is that just what we're requesting for the
It's the
grant?
it's the total project
So that
cost.
includes the match.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Apple Energy, you're gonna come off mute. Apple Energy, did you unmute them? You have to unmute yourself, Apple Energy. Okay, moving on. Going to Carrie Craig. Please unmute yourself when you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon. Kerry Craig with the town of Pendleton. When we explored this possibility through the federal government, maybe about a year ago, the cost to install one EV charger was fairly significant. I'm wondering what the cost is roughly to install a CV charger under this particular grant. Because we were told that it cost anywhere around $500,000.
I think generally speaking, Carrie, if you're looking at a DC fast charging station location, and just like all of these other um, locations across the state of Indiana, it's going to be dependent on the over one location to the next. And if you have to drop a transformer, if the site already doesn't have adequate infrastructure, you're going to have to do that on your own. And so, with that being said, typically what we're seeing from a DC fast charging standpoint at 100 kW per port, it's going to be somewhere in reality is between $300,000 and $500,000. That's why we're requesting when folks submit their intake form to include those budgetary costs from a electrician and from also for hardware and software costs, just so you know what you're getting yourself into. But maybe there's an opportunity to chat offline about this and what you're looking at, and maybe we can help out if possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Apple Energy, when you answering your questions from the chat, when you say 100 kilowatts per port, it means a 200 kilowatt dual port shared. That is correct. And your other question is, should we budget the infrastructure costs into our budget, i.e. transformer? Yes. And I apologize that I won't let you unmute. Going to lower your hand, Apple Energy. Is there any other questions? Yes, there is a minimum 2 ports per location for DC fast charging. And I apologize. The question is there a minimum of 2 ports for direct current fast charging? Yes, the minimum is 2 ports. And the ports can either be NACS, North American Charging Standard, or CCS1. They do not need to be CHAdeMO. One of the other questions that has come up a lot is, when will these grant funds be dispersed? And are the grant funds provided upfront before anything is installed? So this funding is a reimbursement grant. Once countersigned grant agreements have been reviewed, GOEVIN awardees will need to provide copies of invoices, payments, and demonstrate stations are working and or commissioned, so that it needs to be available. Yes. Another question that came up from Apple Energy, does it have to comply with ADA requirements? And yes, it does have to meet ADA compliancy. And more specific information is above the button for the GOEVIN intake form on the website of goevin.com that has the basic RFP related to this funding. One of the other questions that have come up a lot is, are projects for fleets that charge behind a gate or fence eligible? And the answer to that question is, eligible projects must be publicly accessible. If a level 2 project is being proposed, the charging station submitted within the project must be accessible during business hours. If a DC fast charging project is being proposed, the charging station submitted must be publicly accessible 24/7. One of the situations that occurs a lot is car dealerships want to install DC fast charging stations on their property. However, on Sundays and after business hours, those charging stations are protected by a security gate that goes down outside of business hours. And those charging stations are not publicly accessible 24/7, and those would not be eligible under this funding. So there's another question that was asked. Do you all have examples for infrastructure costs, i.e. cost of the transformer, cost per linear foot for three-phase, or would Duke have the assumption costs? Those are going to be project specific and are going to be dependent on location. And those are costs that you're going to have to get and from your local electrician or from your local utility that you're working with and be submitted within the intake form in order to develop a whole budget for the total project. And one of the other questions that has come up a lot is what hardware and software do you recommend to use? And the answer is we don't have any preferred software or hardware providers or electricians. We work with several reliable hardware and software providers, and we can make references to different communities and organizations upon request that have experienced something similar to your specific site requirements. So if you don't have those hardware and software provider vendors, feel free to reach out, but we do not make any recommendations on any entities, one or the other, or do not have a preference as well. All right, Carrie Craig, you're going to be.
Sure. What are the basis of these funds? Are they federal in nature? Are they state? Or are they private?
They are private lawsuit funds that are managed by IDEM. So these are non-federal funds, and they are able to they're able to be stacked with other federal projects.
Thank you.
Okay.
So is there additional reporting that comes with those through the state, or just curious what that looks like?
So we're looking at 5 years of reporting. So we would like to make sure that all of the costs and hardware or software costs and station costs are included within those 5 years. Now, from that 5-year reporting standpoint, we're looking at biannual reporting, so twice a year with a final report. And those reporting requirements are listed within the summary RFP document on the GOEVIN website. So Apple Energy just asked another question. Do these have to be metered separately? They do not have to be metered separately. And then do these projects have to be BABA compliant? BABA compliant means Buy America, Build America compliant, and these charging stations do not have to be BABA compliant as part of the GOEVIN funding opportunity. No BABA compliancy. Just getting into the thick of it with another question that has come up a lot is Open Charge Point Protocol, also known as OCPP compliance. And level 2 charging stations do not need to be OCPP compliant, but DC fast chargers must meet OCPP compliance 2.0. So one of the other questions that has come up a lot from our 8 road shows is how can we submit multiple locations in one form, as it allows to just submit one address. Now, we would like to get as much information as we can on those projects. However, when you're applying for more than one location, please provide an address and fill out the intake form with one. And then within the required W-9 form that you're going to be submitting, please combine an attached spreadsheet as a PDF listing out the locations, whether they're level 2, DC fast charging type of project, installation costs, hardware costs, and software costs by location. All right, in the chat, we have a question from Dave Patterson. Dave asks, will there be another program after this one for those looking to receive funding but cannot make the 6/30/25 deadline? Dave, unfortunately not. This is going to be the last round, and maybe specifically we can jump on a call to kind of answer any of those questions. So I would suggest reaching out to myself, Ryan, or John by email, or giving us a phone call when you're available, and maybe we can help alleviate some of the different issues that you're coming up with. Did you highlight them? Did you? Okay. Sorry, Mike, just saw your question in the Q&A. Michael asks, for the W-9 requirement, are you looking for the W-9 of the property owner or the W-9 of the CPO intending to own the project by land lease? We are looking for the W-9 of who is the applicant, who is going to be expending these funds, and who will be receiving these funds. So if it's a CPO third party, we would want the W-9 of the third party or CPO. And within that W-9 submittal, we would like documentation referencing a form of intent that has basis of the third-party lease with a site host to show that there is documentation that the site host knows that you're applying for charging stations on their property. We just don't want CPOs or third-party vendors applying for funds without the site owner's knowledge or permission. So to build upon that, if you're a third party going to be applying with a site host, please, when you're uploading that W-9, please combine the W-9 and the site host agreement or letter of intent to lease for 5 years so that you can demonstrate the leasing arrangement between the third party and site host owner. Good question. Once again, please either ask your question in the Q&A or raise your hand and we can call and unmute you, and you can ask your question for the group. And all of this information can be found on the GOEVIN website, where the intake form, and we'll have a copy of a presentation or webinar from today. And we do have a summary of the RFP document as well that goes into detail for all of these projects specifically. Additionally, we've tried to make the intake form more like a Google form and not a 50-page grant application. And we're hoping that eases some of the pain that applicants have, but also still demonstrates the needed information in order to make these grant awards and really have successful projects here in Indiana. One of the other questions that has come up a lot is if these charging stations need to be set free, where electric vehicle drivers do not have to pay a fee to charge their vehicle. And the answer to that question is no. These charging stations can accept a fee based on the kilowatt hour and are able to be compensated for the electricity costs. Once again, these GOEVIN intake forms are due June 30th, which is a Monday at 5 p.m. Central. So please feel free to reach out between now and June 30th by 5 p.m. And so we can help you get these intake forms submitted. We are able to assist with any questions that you might have and further discuss any issues or problems that are occurring. But this is a really good funding opportunity that is not federal dollars. Once again, these are non-federal dollars associated with this funding. And it is a great opportunity to really implement publicly accessible charging stations across our great state of Indiana. Okay, we're going to do last call here. Any other questions, or please raise your hand and we can unmute you to ask your question to the group. Thank you, Mr. Warner, for the comment. Thank you for all that you do. Okay. Without further ado, we're going to end today's webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to send an email out to myself, rlissick at drivecleanindiana.org, or John, his email is jdurden@drivecleanindiana.org, or please feel free to give us a call, 219-644-3690. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day.